Welcome to another bite size of Bonjour Chai, the It's Jacques Cartier Right This Way edition. I'm Avi Finegold in Montreal, and today I'll be bringing you an interview with entertainment manager Jacques Gold. But first, let me remind you that our show is sponsored by Atelier Lou Jewelers in Westmount, Quebec, and online at atelierlou.com. I can never get enough of their selection of watches or jewelry, whether you're a serious watch collector or you're getting your first real watch and you enjoy whatever selection they have something for you. Eric and his team can find something for any wrist. There's always offering, as always, our listeners 10% off online with the code BON18, B-O-N-18. That's B-O-N-18 at atelierlou.com for your watch and jewelry needs. Jacques Gold has been an integral part of the Canadian music scene as the manager of musical acts and producers since 1985. Along with Alan Gregg, Jacques has managed bands like The Pursuit of Happiness, The Watchmen, Adam Cohen, and of course, the Tragically Hip. Jacques joins us for a special Canada Day discussion about music, mensches, and management. So, Jacques, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
There's been many, many years of you in Canadian entertainment business. I want to start with one that might be a little lesser known, The Watchmen.
Sure.
Two Jewish kids from Winnipeg.
Three,
that's right, yes. I mean, we always think of them as the core of, Joey and Danny, whatever. But Stanley, absolutely. So, this was 10, 15 years before Matisyahu makes it as like a Jewish figure on a major label. They're identifiably Jewish. Tell me how this all starts and where this goes.
It didn't have anything to do with the fact that they were Jewish. I was the manager of the Tragically Hip, still am today, and they were being represented by an agent named Ralph James who was from Winnipeg, and Ralph knew my tastes in music and had said to me, you should come take a look at these guys. And we kind of danced for almost a year until finally I went, okay, I think they're ready. And then I signed them, but it didn't have anything to do with them being Jewish or not.
No, but what I mean is for myself, like somebody, I loved their music and I identified with it. And as an identifiably Jewish kid in the 90s, to see, these figures that were, not shying away from that, but were all still very much in the mainstream, that was a big deal for me.
Yeah, I guess it was. I never noticed them sort of wearing their Jewishness on their sleeve.
No, but they never shied away from it.
No, but I don't think it was ever brought into... I mean, Max Kerman from the Arkells is Jewish too, right?
That's true.
It's like,
very true.
The list is endless when you think.
Now the list is endless.
No, come on. It started with Bob Dylan. Let's go all the way back, right? So
who was there in Canadian rock in the 90s? For a Jewish teenager to really be like,
what? There's probably a lot more that we think if we decide to go through the list, but
that's probably true.
There's probably a lot more than you think. I knew a lot of Jewish musicians growing up in Toronto, so maybe in Montreal it was different. I don't know. You're in Montreal, right?
There were, yeah. I'm in Montreal.
Yeah, but I don't think they actually wore it on their sleeve. I remember having to fly. Unlike some other artists, I mean, I know that they never talked about not performing on Yom Kippur or not performing on those dates. But when we were doing their tour schedule, I was always conscious of it, right? Where I would be like, well, let's not play that night.
Yeah.
And I would just assume that but they never came out and literally said to me, oh, we're not playing on those nights. We're not playing on the Sabbath. Like Netanyahu won't... Matisyahu. Yeah, he won't play on the Sabbath, right?
Now he will.
Oh, now he will. So, okay. Because someone said to him the best nights of the week for gigs are Fridays and Saturdays.
So you should know, but even that is a big deal because, I remember a moment when I was at the Jazz Fest, the Montreal Jazz Fest, and I ran across Andre Menard, sorry, and
I know
Simard,
I know Andre very well.
And I said, every time I see an Israeli jazz artist or I see John Zorn play, he's always playing on Friday night. You got to pay attention to the fact that it's the one time of the year when we have these Jewish artists coming through town. Don't book them on Friday night for the Jews that want to go to the gig. And he goes, oh, I never thought of that. And then he makes a note to his assistants to make sure that we stop booking, right, the Israelis and Zorn and people like John Zorn, people like that on Friday nights. And just that sensitivity in and of itself is a big deal. So, we have to thank you and things like that in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I was conscious of it, but I was only conscious of it because I was Jewish. Okay, if I wasn't Jewish, I probably wouldn't be conscious of it, because it's amazing how many things I'm involved with where there's a board meeting called or something like that, and I have to say, well, I can't make it that day because it's Yom Kippur. And the other people on the board are Jewish, and they're all like, oh, right, yeah, because it's not on their radar. It doesn't sit in your Apple calendar like Thanksgiving does or any of the other holidays,
Well, I'm a rabbi, so it sits in my calendar too. But that's
but you put it in your calendar.
I put it in.
That's what I'm saying. It's not an automatic like Family Day and Thanksgiving and Christmas Day, and all those days are actually in the Apple calendar, but they don't put all the other holidays in, right? So
absolutely, yeah. So where else did it come into your? Did your Jewishness affect any of the other work that you were doing? Just in general, did it come up?
It's
Jewish
funny.
acts that you were thinking about?
No, it wasn't that. It was funny because I had this similar kind of discussion recently where I noticed that historically in the American music industry, it's predominantly Jews and Italians, and always was, like at the higher levels. The entrepreneurs, but in Canada it wasn't always like that. And there's like maybe a handful of Jewish guys that you can count on that were at the upper levels of the industry in Canada, and hardly any at record companies. Mm-hmm. Canada was a different thing for Jews, but there's significant amount of, let's just say we punched well above our weight when it came to, Sam Feldman, successful guy, sure. Bernie Finkelstein, Reuben Fogel, Bernie Finkelstein. Well, forget about the concert promoters, because Michael Cole and Arthur Fogel and all of those sure. guys, Norman Perry, all of them are all Jewish guys, right? I think out of the whole group, only Donald K. Donald wasn't, right? He just wanted to be,
and he was the one that you would deal with, right? The Hip was always going through.
No, we worked with Reuben. Reuben was my guy from day one.
I still remember the concert at the Spectrum. Sorry for breaking in on this one.
1993.
And no, it was 95. And the album was released that morning, and the concert was that night, and they announced it on Showm, and your ticket was a Polaroid picture.
So that was the special event show. Yeah.
That was scalp your ticket.
It was actually 96.
It was 96. Yeah, that's right. I was in CJN. I was in Dawson College.
Yeah, it was 96. I remember that because I came up with that idea. The scalpers hated me.
Brilliant idea.
Yeah, the scalpers hated me for that.
Anyways.
So it wasn't, but Bernie Finkelstein, Sam Feldman, myself, Eric at Coalition, Steve Waxman, who worked at Warner for many years, but it's a handful of people.
But was there this awareness amongst you guys that, this is who you guys were? You had this crew of Jewish,
not
really.
No, it was never like that.
Interesting.
And because people used to think I was just American because, but I was born there, but but I was raised in Toronto. I moved to Toronto when I was 2, but, my mother was from the Lower East Side, so she was very coffee talk, she was like old school, Lower East Side New York Jew. So,
I get it. I married an American. My kids are American. I brought them back 10 years ago. So
right. So
same idea.
But no, it wasn't. I don't really run into it. I think the entertainment industry historically had a lot of Jews in it. I mean, we kind of started the movie business, right? And if you think about the guys who started the record business way back when, it was mostly Jewish guys that started the record business too, right? All of that, right? So I think we always punched above our weight, I guess, back to what I said earlier, because it was the nature of the beast. I think it's because it was an entrepreneurial business, and
Chess
it wasn't
records
something you
and
went to school for.
all those
You just
people.
did
Yeah,
it,
sure,
you know.
sure.
And the arts in general, right? The arts in general. People think I changed my name, like I was
Oh, yeah.
Finegold or something.
People only wish they could be called
But
Finegold.
I yes, but I never changed my name, right? I never
Yeah.
did. So
So, going to the hip now, you mentioned that you were, that was where your big break where you started and everything was, where everything launched from there. I always saw the band, I mean, Gord Downie in particular, but the band as a whole, as like, because they were so fundamentally democratic. And so, to me, that the spirituality they had, the literateness and the activist streak that they always had really resonated with me as a Jew, right? In addition to it being resonating as a, some of the greatest music, ever put down on record. Was there ever, not to think of them as Jews or as Jewish, but what was their spiritual life like? Because you read a lot about their activism, you read a lot about, the literateness that Gord brought to the lyrics, but you don't get the sense of what the soul of them, not religion necessarily, but spirituality.
well, I think overall, but what's funny, it's never talked about.
Interesting.
Like none of that stuff's talked about. Like we just act,
Just do.
Yeah. Like
Which is a
even
also.
historically, if you look at how they always, I mean, they just got the humanitarian award at the Junos, and one of the reasons they got it was because even when they did give, that we always had a rule like no press conferences, no presentations of checks. We're not doing those kinds of things, right? Like it was always not. It wasn't like we would say we're doing this concert for this charity, but we would never announce how much we gave or anything because that wasn't the whole point for doing it, right? And the money just came along with it. So it wasn't that they did it anonymously, but they didn't want the spotlight for what they already did. They wanted the spotlight for what they were doing.
As an inspiration to others and to move it forward.
Right. Two very different things.
Sure.
Right.
For sure.
So is that spiritual? I don't know. I don't know if that's a spiritual thing. I don't know. Or is it just being good people? They all came from pretty good families. They weren't like from the bad side of the tracks per se.
Yeah.
Johnny's father was a heart surgeon. Robbie's father was a judge, right? Gord St. Clair's father was the dean of medicine at Queen's.
I think there's something fundamentally spiritual about wanting to do good in this world and not even wanting to get the credit for it. Saying that, we are altruists. We want this to be good. That is to me, deep spirituality. Saying that it's about that.
Or is it just being a good human being?
It's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. I mean, you can say it's spiritual and I'll let you call it spiritual if you want, or is it just being a good person? And that's just part of being a good human being and a good person in society.
My brief stint as a pulpit rabbi, I actually gave a sermon based on the last concert where the only thing that Gord spoke the whole night, right? There was singing and that was it. And the only thing that he spoke and he knew that this was his last show and he could have said goodbye. He could have said whatever he could have said. And all he said was he called on the prime minister, right. To honor his commitments.
Right.
Which we have seen the prime minister has really not necessarily gone forward in that, and listeners of this podcast have heard me say that multiple times already, but that's a different discussion. But that's and I thought that was brilliant. This idea of collective responsibility and collective apologies.
Yeah, and I will tell you, it wasn't premeditated either, though.
Okay. Yeah. It just
if you saw the humanitarian award pack and it's on YouTube, there's a cut of Gord saying, I'm not going to pat myself on the back for it. He goes, it just happened.
But that's sometimes the best poetry and the best
He
stuff.
was in the he was in the moment, which is how he always was when he hit the stage. I mean, it's funny because over the years, I would say to him sometimes before he'd go on stage, I said, "Can you thank the radio station, who presented the show?" And I would be like, it would always fall on deaf ears, not because he wasn't listening to me, is because the moment he hit that stage, he was in the moment, and he wasn't. Unless I had a sign on the floor in front of him, and even then maybe he wouldn't say it. So everything was in the moment with him. Everything was, it was motivated by what was happening at the time.
Yeah, that's interesting because I don't even think that I noticed that until the later half of their career because, seeing them in Canada, it's a whole different ballgame than seeing them in the U.S. where you'd be here and you'd see them in huge venues, and so the ability to get close to the band really wasn't the same thing. And and you don't really feel it. But then as soon as I started seeing them in the U.S., when I saw them in Boston on the World Container Tour, I saw them for Plan A in Chicago, and maybe even one more time after that, And then you're just sitting in these 500-seat venues because that's what they're selling in the States, and you're so much closer. I was so much closer. So you're seeing this artist in like a totally different environment.
Well, if you'd seen them early in their career, like the Spectrum, then you would.
When I saw them at the Spectrum, I was in the way back.
But still, there was only 1,000 people in the Spectrum.
Yeah.
But no, I mean that's the other thing. That's the misnomer that I think too many people have is the band. The band we played shows as big as 5,000 people in Chicago. We broke the record for the most nights in a row at the House of Blues in Chicago. In LA, they played, 2 nights at 2,000 people. We go to London and sell 5,000 tickets. So
I just remember that seeing them, the years that I was in the US was 2004 to 2013, and seeing any Canadian band in the US was the biggest blessing because all of a sudden the intimacy that you were able to achieve with the bands, Sam Roberts with 100 people in the band, and this is like after 4 albums, right?
Yeah.
But the Hip was another example of that. I'm just using it to illustrate that, like, I saw, like, I was catching handkerchiefs. I was that close, and I still have them to this day. And you can see this person just, in a different world by himself and really creating in the moment. And then, of course, screw the radio station, like I'm an artist. I'm doing something transcendental, like really like transcendent.
Well, and that's what it was. And I think you would probably try and associate that with some sort of spirituality. And I'm a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. I would associate that with, in Gord's case, with the music moved him. The music.
I'm okay with that. I don't think everybody has to be my brand of spirituality. I think everybody's way of doing things is their own way, and I honor that. I'm not interested in pigeonholing. I'm just saying that there is something really that, as a religious person, one can identify with that and see it and say, "Wow, that's something there."
Well, it's funny you say that because the term is used, but people would say seeing the Hip was a religious experience.
Yeah,
they would say that. Because it affected them spiritually. I think.
I would add to that also the fact that you were in a room there were no casual Hip fans, right? And you were in the room and everybody knew every single lyric to every single song. Like I'm a huge Springsteen fan. It's the same sort of idea, right? When you're on the floor.
I had a talk with a guy from New Jersey on Saturday afternoon about the exact same thing. He's a giant Springsteen fan, and he's a giant Hip fan. And we had the exact same conversation. And when you try and explain to Americans what the Hip means to Canadians, I always say the closest thing, and still doesn't even come close, but the closest thing is what Springsteen means to New Jersey.
So you bring up, I can't possibly agree more, and I think that feeling is what adds to that religious experience. That idea that you're doing it in a group with other like-minded people.
So let me ask you a question, and maybe you can give me an answer.
Please.
Why is it that so many Jews like Springsteen, even though he's not Jewish, like the Hip, and like the Grateful Dead and those kinds of bands. Why is it?
I think it's because they're bands that are, I mean, shooting from the hip here, no pun intended. I think it's that exact thing. It's a combination of music and lyrics that really speak to something spiritual and reach for something a little bit higher, but also that they're all experiences. They are 360-degree experiences. I don't care that Madonna makes a 360-degree package, right, with Live Aid or Jay-Z or whoever else makes those 360. To me, a 360-degree package is about a band saying that when you're part of this, you're really part of this. You want a picture of, Gord on your wall, which I do. It's just not on this wall. Because it means something bigger than just a singer, right? It's not just, Vince Neil, to use a great recent example of somebody who is not a spiritual individual necessarily, right? Or any other, even looking at the bands today, there's a lot of bands that don't necessarily have that. They make you feel great hours and hours after you walk away from the show, that make you want to have an after party with random people just to connect with, right? Because you can't not talk about what just happened, right? That to me is, Jews identify with that, right? It's like going to synagogue and going to the Kiddush and wanting to talk about the rabbi's sermon, some people, right? Or just complaining about it or whatever it might be, right? Obsessively, there are certain artists and certain bands that allow you to obsessively pour over, right, the oeuvre as a whole, and the hip is definitely one of those.
So it's funny because all of those bands did it unconsciously. They just did it.
Sure.
Whereas then you take Kanye West, who's trying to actually create a church of Kanye West, which seems to be much more of
a Sunday service that he includes into that 360 degrees.
Which to me comes off as disingenuous in some ways.
Yeah, I think it speaks to a different generation and a different, what speaks to different people, right? It's for a different mentality and a different mindset, and I'm not gonna, I can knock it in 17 different ways, but I'm not going to right now.
No, because it's not about religion.
But yeah,
it's not about. No, my point is all the bands we just talked about did it in a very unconscious, non-deliberate way. They just did their thing, and they made the experience feel that way, as opposed to calling it that, which seems
it was organic. It evolved into that, and it just that's how it was.
That was me with Peter Gabriel.
I can see that. Peter's,
he's
a spiritual guy in that in the same sort of vein.
Totally, yeah.
So let's work on you for a second here, because you have it's a great story. The 17 years off, 17 years on. 17 years on, 17 years off, and now going to be another 17 years, right?
Robbie from the band reminded me the beginning of June, because it was like 1 year to the day I started again, and it was June 8th, and he says, 16 more years.
There you go. So just to set the stage, you came in after the work of Saskadelphia, right? This new EP that came out, or you were part of it?
No, I started a year ago.
So, yes, that's right. Sorry, yes. No, that's what I meant. You came in right around, this is like the first big project that they've put out post this.
Well, and Gord Downey's solo project, which was A Way Is Mine, which came out last year.
Beautiful album.
All of that was me getting back involved.
And it culminates to me with this unbelievable, like, tear-inducing performance with Feist and the rest of the band and the Junos, which if you haven't seen it, you absolutely have to go see it. It's really, really, really transcendent, really something else.
Well, it's funny. I had a conversation with my friend Jacques Ross, who's an agent. He's the Arkells agent. He's Sam Roberts' agent. We were having, because he was over here watching the Junos with me and with Johnny Fay from the band. And he said, what made it really special is Leslie didn't try and make it about her.
Yeah, because that was the whole band was about that.
Right, and she understood their mentality. And that's why they were so hesitant to do it because I had been talking to them about it for 6 months until I brought up Leslie as an option. That's when they all went, yes. We could see that working because they knew she wouldn't make it about her.
Will there be other performances in the future, even one-offs? Come on, help us out here. give us a little bit of
Nothing that I know of. Listen, you never know, right? Like, I will say that they're now at a point where they basically say never say never.
Good.
So could there be another situation like this? Could there be? There's obviously tons and tons of things being proposed to us. We'll know it when it's right. As Brian May said in the, did you see the documentary of Adam Lambert and Queen?
Yeah.
As Brian May said, we weren't looking for a singer; he just appeared.
Yeah, I hear that. So going back to that, I was thinking about it for a long time actually.
Are you going to give me singer ideas?
I'm not going to give you singer ideas. I'm going to give you work to do.
Okay.
I thought about this for a lot because you're coming in to do the work of what one does. What does one do? And everybody's asked this question in the media, and I think that there's an answer here in some way. Right? What does one do when you're managing something which was no longer going to be creating anything? Right? Your entire work is going to be in the other things, the back catalog, the archives, various other things related to this, right? And the analogy that I came up with that hit me in my mind was that when the temple was destroyed, the second temple is destroyed in Jerusalem, this is the year 70 CE, and the rabbis, particularly one rabbi in particular, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he goes and realizes that we can't have this religion go on without a temple. What are we going to do? And he makes this shift and he says, look, right, we have this text, but this text is going to die if we don't have a temple. What do? He makes the temple into a bunch of temples. He says, don't think about praying where you go to services at the temple and you hear worship, right? You hear this, you see the sacrifices being done, and then you go home and you don't do anything, right? You have to do the work yourself, and you have to do it in your private synagogues. You go from being a spectator to being active. You go from knowing that the texts are out there and rabbis are learning it to you learning the text yourself. And he says this enables him all of a sudden and enables Judaism to go and move things forward and say, we are going to be migratory. We can live anywhere as long as we have synagogues for people to congregate and texts for people to study. And that enabled people to live for 2,000 years without a temple, right? So he was brilliant in that way. And it's exactly the challenge that you have. What do you do when there's a fixed canon of work and there's no more work being made, right? So the work becomes taking the people and making them realize exactly what we had said before, that everybody was part of a hip concert because everybody felt that part of that community, right? Mm-hmm. Is the archives and the texts, the extended work, right, that we have, right, is what keeps the faith alive, reminding the community of the fans, right, that Gord can't do the work, that we have to do that work now, right? Whether it's the activism of, that Gord would have absolutely been carrying on to this day if he was around for Indigenous rights and all of these, everything surrounding that, to reminding people what it means to be part of a community of music lovers around this specific text of musics, right, that are no longer going to be performed necessarily or not on a regular basis and are not going to be created anew. So we have to create that and extend that to people saying, you listen to the hip at home, you listen to it with friends, that is your religious work. That is the work of extending the community.
Well, it's interesting you say that because we take the responsibility of managing this archive mm-hmm. and these things, the name, very seriously. We don't take it lightly, and we understand what it means to people. And even before we were putting out Saskadelphia, it was put out as a surprise release, but there were certain people we obviously had to include in the discussions before it was coming out. And when I would have a discussion with a partner, let's say someone that was going to be working with us on a launch of something or whatever, I would always preface it. First of all, we made everyone sign NDAs, but when we finally told them why they were on this call like this or something like this, and because we would make them sign an NDA and they didn't know what they were signing an NDA for, and then we would reveal what we were doing. And the ones that would respond with things like, oh, we're making history. was when I knew we were working with the right people, because they understood the gravitas of what we were doing, and also the responsibility, because of, I don't mean to come off as high and mighty, but when you have those kinds of fans, you have a responsibility to those people, right? And if you want them to continue to participate, then you have to make sure that you're respecting them.
Yeah, absolutely. Give them.
That was like one of the things from the beginning. Our strategy from the beginning, my partner Alan and I, when we first started working with the band in '86, was we said right from day one it was going to be a fan first strategy, that radio and record companies and TV people and all of those people came second, and fans came first.
You're using them. It's not using the fans to get close to the radio. It's you're using the radio and the internet and the TikTok and all of that to get to make the fans closer to the music and the band.
No, but actually, Avi, it's the other way around, right? It's the other way around, because what we felt is that we built a constituency.
I think we're saying the same thing. We're saying the same thing. I'm saying that we're using the radio and they're the tools. The fans are the end product. They're the real thing.
No, right. They are the pipe. We would refer to them as they're the pipeline, right? But from our strategy standpoint, what we said was, if we build the constituency, then all the media outlets cannot hurt us. They can't, even if they write bad things about us, it won't matter. And radio will have to play us whether they like it or not, because the audience that we built on our own will be too big for them to ignore. So we always went after the people first and let them do our job for us in a lot of ways. Because radio used to do things like call-out research. So they would call and say, have you heard of this song? They say, I don't know the song, but I know the band. And it was always also not a song strategy. It was a band strategy. It was always about the band. It was never about one individual track or one individual concert or anything like that. So that was what we were doing.
Because relationships don't die, and they've built relationships. It's relational, music making, right? It's I'm making something as an artist for myself, but I know that I have a fan that is doing that. It's not about it being radio friendly. And once you establish those relationships, right? Once you create what we call, in the rabbi world or in the Jewish world, where the nonprofit, the relational work that is being done, then that stuff, you said you can't just walk away from it, because somebody says, I don't want to walk away from it. I like it. I want to keep it going. And that's when they want more. Then when they want the archives, they want to gather still. We should be making, right? And there are specific days in the Hip calendar, right? You said that the Jewish calendar doesn't show up, but I can assure you that every Hip fan, right, watches that concert the night on the anniversary of, August 19th. And
August
20th. Sorry, that's what I meant. August 20th, people watch it, right? And people watch, and people will celebrate birthdays, and people will
know when things come out. Gord passed away October 17th. Okay, I have a question for you. I want to talk to you about this, since you're a rabbi and you understand numerology and Kabbalah, right?
I've seen all of your pieces in the numerology. Go for it. Tell all our fans. I saw you wrote it up somewhere already.
No, I think I was discussing with someone, but I don't think it ever made it into the newspaper. I think maybe my friend Karen wrote it for FYI. I think she may have.
That sounds like that's maybe Karen where I saw it. Yeah, I do my work.
A Jewish writer,
research.
Right? So you tell me. So there's some strange stuff happening. So I'm 17 years off, right? So 7 and 1 is 8. So we know what 8 is in Kabbalah, right? What's 8 in Kabbalah?
It's the first of the upper realms.
But it's supposed to be the most spiritual, outer worldly number. That's what I've read, right? Because 8 days of Hanukkah, like all of the sort of things that weren't supposed to happen but happened were.
It's the otherworldly, exactly.
The otherworldly numbers. My birthday is 4/4, which is 8, right? So all of these 8s kept coming up when I took over the band. I also re-signed the band on June the 8th.
So I'm a rationalist. I'm not huge on these things.
I'm a rational.
I'll throw it back to you like this, in a very specific thing, and with this we can, we can start thinking about.
No, I have to tell you one more thing
please,
though that ties into this. Okay, so last year on June the 30th, the night before Canada Day, we did a broadcast with Sirius XM. You know, that Hip have their own channel on Sirius called the Tragically Hip Radio. And it was the first time the guys had gotten back together to do an interview, and we did it to sort of kick off Canada Day. And I'm listening to it, and they're talking about gourd. And I had decided I was going to put some cream cheese on a bagel, okay? And they're starting to talk about gourd, and I pull the cream cheese out of the fridge, and I, like you do when you take something that's especially a dairy product out of the fridge, you look at the expiration date. And as they're talking about gourd, I pull up the cream cheese, and I look at the expiration date, and what does it say but October 17th?
Wow. The
day gourd died, 17. Okay, and remember in Fiddler's Green, he says September 17th, which was the day his nephew died. Yeah. So obviously I'm listening to the band, and I turn this over, and I've already gone through this 17 business for the last 3 weeks. And then I see this, which is why I kept this thing here.
No, look, I think that, you know, in all seriousness, I think that, you know, as a rationalist, I say there's always coincidences, and you'll find coincidences wherever they happen. I have one that I can think back, you know, that it just hits me now that I remember. What year did Silent Radar come out from the Watchmen?
Silent Radar,
I know
98, 99?
98. Came out in 98. And the last song on that album is called Brighter Hell, right?
Right.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful song, really elegiac, really, you know, sad, moving. And I remember it just got on my Walkman the September 12th. And I passed by a shop when they still had TV sets in the shops, and they were showing footage from the day before, in 2001, September 12th, 2001. Right. And he hits on the lyric, "What would you say falling from a building?" And I've never been able to see any footage of September 11th, 2001 without thinking about making a montage to that song.
Well, it's funny because they put out a...
But that's a coincidence.
Right.
I wouldn't go and say that that's God speaking. And
people say there are no coincidences.
Exactly. So it's either you believe in coincidences or you don't. Sorry, you were saying.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that because they had a record coming out in late September that same year, a new record in 2001.
Slow motion.
And I was living in New York during 9/11. I was there. I was in Manhattan when it all went down. And I remember I had to fly to Winnipeg for the launch of the record at the end of September. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to fly. Like, none of us knew. Well, I managed to fly, but we had, I flew in a day early, and we had a day off before the show to launch the record. We were doing like a show, you know? Mm-hmm. And that day off was Yom Kippur, and I went to synagogue with Joey and his dad, Max, on Yom Kippur because I happened to be in town. I said, well, maybe I should go to synagogue. And he said, yeah, you'll come with us.
Well, the 20th anniversary of September 11th is coming up, and there's your idea. The band can do a music video for a 20-year-old song in a meaningful way, maybe, hopefully, or not. Pass it along.
I'll let. Have you talked to Sam? Have you ever talked to Sammy Cohen?
I have never spoken to any of them. I think I've seen them live in concert twice because they didn't do a lot of Montreal.
You should do your podcast with Sammy. He's a musicologist.
We'll get him on. Absolutely.
I'd be happy to make the intro. I talked to Sammy more than anybody else in the band.
We absolutely should. We'll get him on. So this episode's coming out on Canada Day. We'll close up with that. I want to ask you spontaneously now. What is your most Canadian Jewish moment, whether in the industry or with the Hip or with the Watchmen or with Adam Cohen or with any of these wonderful individuals? Is there a moment that really encapsulates the Canadian Jewish experience for you as somebody who's been in the industry for so long?
It's funny you say that. I think it's funny because I never thought of it that way. I never did. I never thought of, a sort of a Jewish moment in the industry because, as I said, there weren't a lot of Jews in the industry. And when you do find one, it's like, oh, you're Jewish in the industry? It's like that kind of thing. Although when I managed Adam, what I always found interesting was I always stayed at the house on Valier, Leonard's house.
Sure.
And that's where
I'm looking right now I'm looking right now across the street at the synagogue, at the Shar Shemaim synagogue.
Right. So I would stay at the house with Adam all the time, whenever, and I was in Montreal a lot, and we would stay there, and him and I furnished the place because we used to have the whole band stay there. So him and I went shopping along Saint Laurent and all those furniture stores to buy beds and this, so everybody, and we made it nice. We made it nice because Leonard liked it, austere. He didn't want anything in there, right? But there was always this one picture of Leonard's great-grandfather.
Of course.
And his grandfather, the rabbis.
Yes.
All sitting around this room. It's a famous picture. And it was always in the front hall of the house when you walked in, on this little table below the mirror that was there when you first walked in. And the picture always sat there. And it was always a reminder of where you were when you came into that
moment.
House.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it closes out with Adam wanting to bring the choir back in.
Well, and also working with the cantor.
The cantor and the choir, who are very good friends of mine, and like I said, it's our synagogue.
Yeah. But Adam never. I don't think Adam ever saw himself as very religious. But he definitely understood his kind of duty. I mean, because Leonard wasn't religious, but he was from a line of pretty famous rabbis. And he basically was, you want to talk about a spiritual person, he literally was a rabbi without being a rabbi.
I'd call him a rabbi.
Right?
I'd call him a rabbi, absolutely.
Right? Because he spoke...
Who else but a rabbi would say, and I heard this, that this was in the final weeks of his life, right? He was told that Bob Dylan had won the Nobel Prize for literature. I don't know if you ever heard what his response was, but he said something along the lines of, that's like pinning a medal to Mount Everest for being the highest mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that to me, just profundity. But yeah, anyways, Jake, this has been an honor and a pleasure. Thanks for sharing all of these, the stories, the wisdom. It's been really an honor. Thank you again. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for Thursday, July 1st, Canada Day. Our producer is Michael Fraiman. Technical production is by Andre Goulet. Our music is by Socalled. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Please leave a comment and a rating on the platform of your choice and let us know what you think about our discussions on the CJN Lounge on Facebook. As always, I'm Avi Finegold, and I'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Ellen Besner. I'm the host of the CJN Daily Podcast. It's a bite-sized daily look at news that's important to Canadian Jews at home and around the world. Our episodes are about 10 minutes long. I want to invite you to tune in because we've got a fascinating interview out now with Canadian billionaire and philanthropist Charles Bronfman. He just turned 90 years old. And if you haven't heard of him, he co-founded the Birthright program that gives Jewish kids free trips to Israel. And now he's worried about the rise of anti-Semitism and hatred of Israel, and especially about how it's all been made worse by the recent hostilities between Israel and Hamas.
It really let the genie out of the bottle. The genie was in the bottle. And one of the people I can blame for this whole mess is Donald Trump.
The CJN Daily. It's what Jewish Canada sounds like.